All right. What's up? We're going to get into the history of MGTOW ideas in this video. Now, there's a lot of different types and branches of MGTOW and different sub-philosophies in MGTOW. But I think the general consensus nowadays about what MGTOW is basically it's a single guy that, has basically stopped pursuing romantic relationships or possibly stopped pursuing marriage. Typically, mostly, I think pursuing marriage is the most common thing because of the, problems with, I would say, divorce. But it's really, there's just a lot of problems between men and women in the modern time. And it culminates in divorce. And because of the natural tendency for women to be hypergamous, even though the law is not written in a gendered way, it does happen to tend that more often than not that it's going to be the man that ends up being punished and having to pay for the divorce. So that's the main reason why men avoid marriage. Because it's just too complicated. There's no way to do any arbitrage with women. They refuse. And so, the conservatives refused also to change the policies in any way, shape, or form. Now, what the problem with that, with the conservatives is that men aren't stupid. And the main argument that MGTOW would employ in this situation is the gun in the room argument. They would ask, if you know that there's a gun in a room and there's another person in the room that's legally allowed to shoot anyone who comes into that room, would you enter that room? Of course, the answer is no, right? But once you're in the room, right? Once you're already in that room, now you have to do whatever that person says. Because they're legally allowed to shoot you, right? So therefore, men are saying, we're just not going in that room. And conservatives refuse to take the gun off of the table. That's all it is. They refuse to take the gun off the table for men because they believe that everything is the man's fault. All right. So let's get into the history. Originally, the word MGTOW was found in some type of proto-libertarian website, and the main spirit remains that it was a pro-marriage, pro-natalist movement that actually saw that the current system was disincentivizing men to get married. And because of that, they came out with the word MGTOW, but actually it also included women. And the main premise was that it was to restore the balance of responsibility and masculine and feminine roles to men and women. That was the original premise of MGTOW. When the word was created, whoever created that word, that was the intent and the intention, and that is the intent and intention that I come at MGTOW with. That the current system itself is what is disincentivizing men to get married, and unless you change the system, men will not get married because they're not stupid. Right? So that's the idea. But then you have several groups of people that these ideas glom onto. First, you have the disaffected male feminist, which is typified by Warren Farrell. Warren Farrell was a man who was a leading, feminist author, pro-feminist author, a male. and he fought for the rights of women in the 60s and 70s, I think, no, actually, sorry, 70s and 80s. And then when, third wave feminism hit and he realized that it was not about equality, he became a disaffected male feminist and started writing about men's rights. And you could say that he was possibly one of the progenitors of the men's rights movement. And then you have another group of men who were the divorced dads. Now, these guys had horror stories, stories like, I came home from work, my wife was giving a guy a blowjob, she lifts her head out of his lap, turns her head to me and says, I want a divorce, and then goes back to giving the guy a blowjob. And that man who just came home from work has to now leave his house, leave his children, right? This is what guys were hearing, right? What was that guy, that the Christian Mormon guy who his wife was cheating on him, and then the judge gave her the house, the car, the kids, everything. He literally converted to Islam. You guys remember that guy? He converted. He got so slammed in court in America that he converted to Islam. Right? So you've got these guys, and there was, I guess it culminated in A Voice for Men, which was led by Paul Elam. Obsidian was there, a lot of other people. And these two groups, basically the men's rights movement typified by like the Warren Farrell type, and the divorced dads typified by like a Paul Elam, they started to combine together into what was more likely known as men's rights activists and the men's rights movement. Now, these guys, they had forums and they wrote articles and blogs, mostly because it was before YouTube was very popular. And they're getting attacked by feminists and stuff like that. And their main premise was that they were trying to, raise the awareness of men that the divorce laws and the child custody laws in the United States, and probably most of the Western world, were dramatically rigged against men on purpose by the feminist court systems for several reasons. One is because a divorced guy now has to pay for 2 houses, 2 cars, 2 sets of clothes for the kids, and 2 sets of toys at each house, right? So it's all about capitalism, right? Then the divorce lawyers get money. The court gets money, right? Everybody's sucking the money out of the guy. And what did he do? He came home from work and his wife was giving some other guy a blowjob. Right? So then these guys were trying to make a change through the legal system. And then that's when enters the new atheist. Because you guys wouldn't listen to the divorced dads, because you guys wouldn't listen to the men's rights activists that were telling you that it was never about equality. Here come the new atheists, led by Barbarossa and Stardust. They enter the scene. They take on the moniker MGTOW, men going their own way. Now it's known as MGTOW 2.0. MGTOW 2.0 goes to war with the men's rights movement. Stardust's superior biological knowledge was employed, along with other people like C.S. MGTOW and Coltrane, was employed against the men's rights movement to make I would say, a superior argument that it was biologically determined that society is going to always turn on men because of the fact of the bottleneck of reproduction. And that no matter what you say, what you do, how you act, how many great arguments you make, because of that biological fact, society will never, ever, ever, ever help a man. Ever. That was the argument. Right? And the men's rights activists couldn't argue against it because they weren't getting any laws changed because the conservatives weren't listening to them. So they took over. The new atheist took over the men's rights movement by claiming that it was a biologically determined that society had it out for men and society wants to crush men under its heel. Right? So then enter TFM. He's bringing constitutional legal arguments and also biological arguments. He has good biological arguments as well, but he was bringing strong, and that's where the TWRA came from, because his thesis was that in fact he was just employing the pre-federalist type of system of republicanism, where it was a net taxpayer system and you had to have skin in the game in order to have some type of say in government. Not sexist, not racist, traditional American values. But he knew that people would interpret that as TWRA. And so to combat that fact, which I'm not sure if that was the best strategy, but it was a strategy. And to combat that fact, he got ahead of it and just started saying TWRA. I was never in agreement with that. You can check my videos. You can tell me if you can find a video where I say TWRA. That, you know what I'm saying? I never said that. So that's all he was employing, was just a basic conservative constitutionalist legal argument. That if you're not a net taxpayer, then you don't get to vote. And that was how it was for a very long time in the United States. But he knew that you guys would automatically assume that he was saying TWRA, so he just started saying TWRA. And then, of course, he's a businessman. He's got a market. You guys aren't changing the laws. You guys are refusing to change the laws. You're refusing to listen to him. He's debating Prager from PragerU. He's debating James Corbett. Nobody wants to listen. Right? You people have no empathy. You see a man that's reduced to banging a sex doll, and then you just immediately assume that he's the worst person on earth. You don't have any empathy. You don't say, what would drive a man that was in the military, an intelligence officer, a hardworking, good man, what would drive him to that? You didn't even ask the question. You just jumped on him. Blah, 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 transhumanism, blah, blah, blah. You didn't even ask what would drive a good man to that. You see what I'm saying? No empathy. No care. Just all you care about is yourself and what you're talking about. right? So then we all get banned, all of us, every one of us, banished off the internet. Can't even say the word. Can't even do advertising. People tried when they said, oh, well, the reason why we're demonetizing you all is because we can't get advertisers. I had videos of people in MGTOW literally going to Google with money and entering in, I want to buy an ad right now. They pulled down the thing and they said, you can't buy one. And then they tell you, oh, but it's because there's no advertisers, right? So we all get wiped out. The PUAs and the conservatives hate us because, you know, MGTOW 2.0, Stardust, Barbarossa, they completely, you know, demolished them. They're like, well, what are you guys doing? I mean, if you're not getting them pregnant, what are you even doing? You're doing nothing. You're just wasting everybody's time. Right. And then TFM, you know, he came to the point where he's like, kind of like, well, if you're going to do religion, good. Otherwise, you know, society's about to collapse, and we can see it. His prediction was correct. His prediction was more correct than all you guys. He's like, women are going to vote in socialism. It's over. It's hockey mask time. Nobody wanted to listen to him, though. They were just like, oh, man, look at him. He has a monkey thing, and what is he doing over here? Okay. So then the PUAs and the conservatives regroup after Trump. They basically put on the mask of MGTOW. They steal TFM's arguments. And then they get channels that have 2 million subscribers while TFM's banned. They talk about exactly what TFM was talking about. Exactly. Word for word. Didn't even change it. Didn't even add anything new to it. I mean, we're all building off of what each other builds off of. He didn't add anything new to it. He put our mask on, took our arguments, get millions of views, and then you tell everybody to not do the thing that was the basis of the thing that we were going to do, which is a marriage strike for men that weren't already married, to stop chasing women, stop buying porn, all that type of stuff, but not on a religious basis for the purpose of religious marriage, but actually for the purpose of men to have their own self-determination in the world. Because all society has for men is what they need to do. You need to do this. You need to be this. You need to go there. You need to do this. You need to do that. What do women need to do? Nothing. Then a man wants to define himself, and what do you do to him? You roast him. You get rid of them. No, they're messing up the plan. Stop it. Right? But the problem is, it's not going to stop. Men aren't stupid. Men see the gun in the room. They're not going in the room, and then it's messing up society even more. Because you conservatives, you need to figure out how to incentivize men to get into marriage. Because the gunpoint thing's not working anymore. There's enough liberal women in society that will just bang a guy whenever he wants to, as long as he does enough push-ups, that you're not going to be able to stop it. So you actually have to incentivize men to get married, not tell them, oh, it's your fucking duty, and if you don't do it, you're not a man. Get in there. What's the incentive? There's like a million incentives for women. You get the money, you get the house, you get the car, you get the kids. What's in it for men? You get punished. You got to work. You got to make sure she's happy. If she's not happy, you're not happy. Can't say no. Yeah, they can't say no. I forgot about that. Timothy Blades, right? The Timothy Blades story. Timothy Blades Iraq veteran, Afghanistan veteran, car mechanic. His wife wants a new truck. He doesn't want to buy her a new truck. She's already got a truck. It works. Now she wants a divorce because she's going to take his money and buy a truck. Where's Timothy Blades now? Rest in peace, Timothy Blades. You guys getting it now? These aren't incels. Right? And so if you can't incentivize the top men in society to get married because they don't want to lose all the money that it takes, it's so hard to earn nowadays, that it's so hard to, and if you lose your money for a second, you end up on the gutter in the street, right? And you want them to take that risk, and for what? For nothing, right? For some conservative fairy tale. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about the white picket fence stuff. It's not there, don't exist. Women have a certain biopsychology, and there's just certain things that we haven't evolved out of. The 7-year itch is probably one of the main things, because basically the hormones, I know you guys don't want to talk. I know that love is an abstract concept and all that, and it means duty and responsibility and this and that and that. But there's also the biological attraction aspect. And those hormones, those endorphins, they wear off after about 7 years. Interesting, right? You know, there is truth to those sayings, you know, the 7-year itch, and it's scientifically proven that those endorphins wear off after about 7 years. And you know, you can't get it back after that. So I agree with the Christian framework for marriage, but in reality, most people are not Christians in that way. And you saw the article that I was reading earlier where the woman's getting divorced by email. You know, it's like you guys can just ignore it, but that's the only way to get everybody married is if you have to incentivize the richest guys there has to be an incentive for them to be married. Like, what's the incentive for Elon Musk to be in a monogamous relationship? Right? What's the incentive? There isn't one. Does he want to end up like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, where he gets his revenue just cut in half immediately? Right? And then it just flows from there, right? Once the top guy gets married, then the women look down. Then once that guy gets married, then the women go down. Then once that guy gets married, then the women look down. Then once that guy gets married, and then it flows down, trickle down marriagenomics, right? But if you can't incentivize those top guys, if you cannot find the incentive, and it's just God said so. If that's the only incentive, I mean, Elon Musk doesn't believe in that. Right? And there has to be some incentive there for men. Otherwise, it's disrespectful to just tell them, just got to do it just cuz. Why? Why? Cuz. All right. You're going to do a depopulation. No, you're doing it by disincentivizing men. By disincentivizing men to get married, you're causing the depopulation. You conservatives, by not changing the laws to incentivize men to get married. It's your fault, not ours. We're not promoting depopulation. You are. And how are you doing it? By not changing the laws and disincentivizing men from getting married. That's how you're doing it. Because we have to work together in order to change the laws. And if you refuse because we just won't join your church, then fine. But the guys with muscles are just going to keep going and banging the liberal chicks, and you can't stop them. And that's bad for all of us, you know? But I mean, what are you going to tell them? What are you going to say to them? They don't believe in your God. And they're like, where's the incentive? Because that's the type of society that we've been programmed. Where's the money? Show me the money. Right? And if you're showing, the only thing you could show them is money going out of their pocket, right? What's the joke? Why would I get married? I could just find a woman I hate right now and give her half of my money. Right? So where's the incentive? You know, you can laugh at me all you want, but you got all these guys out there that are good, hardworking guys that just want to settle down with a wife and kids, and maybe they don't believe in Jesus or whatever, but they're still human. And if you can't understand the concept of what's going on here, is that the men are being disincentivized by conservative laws. Ronald Reagan, no-fault divorce. You guys did that because you were rich. All of you boomers were rich and you just wanted to be able to get rid of your wives and get a new one. So that's why you're like, all right, no-fault divorce. Yeah, that's great because you were rich and you already had your house and stuff and you could just dump one wife and get a new one. And plus, after the wars, the gender ratios were highly skewed. After World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the Korean War, Vietnam, right? There was less men because they were getting killed in the wars. So the gender balance was skewed so as that there were more women than men, creating a higher demand for men. And also, at that time period, as further and further you go back, the less technology you have, the more demand for male strength there is, right? So the further and further we go into the future, the less demand for male strength. And then also this economy is diminishing men's economic political power while increasing women's economic political power. And what else increases women's political power? Not having children. Terence McKenna said that. He actually laid out a plan that women should actually stop having kids or only have one kid because having too many kids decreases their political power. Right? And so the only thing that conservatives can do is re-examine state marriage and figure out how that they can incentivize men back into that room. Right? Because think about it. Men are not stupid. They are not going to go into a room with a loaded gun with someone who's legally allowed to shoot them. They're just not going to go into the room. Right? All right. So that's my basic thesis on the history of MGTOW ideas. Right here, we have the video for the groundwork for the metaphysics of monkeys, the channel is now called. The link for this channel is in the description, and also the link to this Logic 101 video. And he has a playlist with all of his logic videos on his channel, and you can check those out. So basically, that's it for the video. Have a good day and peace.